I'm gonna hobble here and try to make a talk. You know, living life in excruciating pain, having a herniated lower lumbar disc is an experience I wouldn't wish on anyone. But, you know, pain does put things into perspective. And I'd like to do a talk today on what the end of the Mayan calendar means to me and what it should mean to you and how you, as an individual, can help. You know, the Mayan civilization, depending on how you calculate it or who you talk to, extends back $14,000 to $18,000 in the United States. But in Mayan history, obviously they wouldn't start their civilization. You know, imagine us saying, oh, we started just 200 years ago. No, we go back, right? So in all reality, the Mayans civilization came down from Russia through Canada, you know, because of the permafrost, they were able to cross the barrier. So in many respects, the Mayan calendar the Mayan civilization really extends back probably 30,000 years. And it probably dates itself back all the way to, the Hittites and, the Middle Kingdom, right? Where the birth of civilization started. So don't get trapped into dates. I mean, how long did the Mayans... You know. And the Mayan calendar is ending December 12th, or December of next 2012. Now, obviously, there's problems with that too, in the sense that, okay, whose calendar, all yada, yada, yada. But I don't really care about that. Because ultimately, what I want to talk about is really how I see things unfolding in the future. And before I talk about that, I equate something I call the closed institution with the Mayan calendar. What is the closed institution? Well, the first closed institution was probably the chieftain, right? The chieftain and his family. And from the chieftain and his family, at some point, a religious order came about in order to keep the chieftain and his family in power. And at some point, the chieftain became, that order, I'm gonna sit down here, put my back against this thing. At some point, that order became a monarchy. And for thousands of years, monarchy ruled. Monarchy was all powerful. At some point, the religious bodies became powerful too, right? Religion got a surge. And you had the Catholic Church, and or even before the Catholic Church, you could say there was the Celtic religious and so on, right? The Celts. And well, in 1215, an event happened called Magna Carta. Now, I grew up in England, so I studied this. Probably you've never heard of Magna Carta if you're an American. We don't study it. It's not important in our society. But the Magna Carta was a very important event because it was the merchants rising up and taking away power from the monarchy in England. Now, ultimately, that event repeated itself, you could say, with the French Revolution, which we all do know about, right? And Louis XIV. And really, that was the transition from the monarchy to the corporation, right? It's the merchants forming corporations, the idea of corporations, okay? And it was the Industrial Revolution that really empowered the corporation into something, as powerful as the monarchy, right? And over the last 300 years, the corporations gotten smaller and smaller in the divide. And really now, the corporations have become monarchies unto themselves. If you look at companies like Google and Facebook, I mean, these companies are massive. These are, multi-billion-dollar companies. Microsoft that are in essence have more money, more powerful combined than any one individual. Now, what do monarchies and corporations have in common? Well, they're closed institutions. And a closed institution ultimately favors a few stakeholders to improve and to make them richer. And as a result of these closed institutions, the closed corporate institution, what happened was there was banking. Banking is just a conglomerate of individuals who are very powerful, it's a symptom of the closed corporation or a product of the closed corporation in order to ultimately keep interest and to fund and keep the corporation going. Obviously, the IMF is all about putting money in to seed what? Corporations, business, in order to pay back, right? And ultimately, it's very powerful corporations saying, hey, how can we gain control of smaller corporations, or how can the corporation take control of countries, right? That's what the World Bank and the IMF is all about. Now, there are people who get this, and there are people who, that's why they protest. They see the evil, right? The Rupert Murdoch white noise media that you're susceptible to, that pays for Fox and everything else, that pays for 99% of the media you watch is controlled by the same corporation, right? So the information distributed to you or sent to you is information that they want. So the end of the Mayan calendar to me represents the beginning of the end of the closed corporation for something I call the open, or call it the People's Corporation. Now, the idea of an open corporation isn't necessarily new. I could argue that in Mexico and some of the, and if you watch the documentary The Corporation, it talks about, employee-owned corporations, or even in more socialist countries where the corporation is closed and dislocated or disenfranchised a bunch of its employees have come back and taken control. And I would define that corporation that they have created as an open corporation. Now, they are obviously far and few between. There isn't many open corporations out there. So, what I've said about, and it's funny because the idea of the open corporation is a relatively new one to me. I would say it's only something that I realized in the, I got a mosquito here, so I'm going to have to walk. Don't bite me, you evil little mosquito. I'm going to move because I'm going to get eaten up here. What I realized was that I have been working on a framework to launch startups, okay? And there's a whole mess of talks where I talk about that. I'm not going into it, but basically in a nutshell, 99%, and this is the dirty little secret that angel investors and Global Entrepreneur Week or anyone involved in startups don't want you to know, okay? They're not going to promote this because in promoting it, they're cutting their own throat. But the simple fact is this. I mean, Startup America, all these folks that are promoting, Startup Weekend, Hackathon, all these folks are not going to promote this because ultimately it's detrimental to their well-being. But the simple fact is this, is 99% of pre-seed startups and business ideas, right? So a pre-seed startup is an incorporated, we're a pre-seed startup, FOUNDUPS, okay? We haven't gotten any angel investors. We don't have any institutional investments. We're just kind of bootstrapping it. We're doing it ourselves. We're trying to get going, right? We're pre-seed. Fail to become seeded. Now, obviously, I'm jumping a set step from seed to seeded, okay, to make my numbers work. And I don't know the numbers, but maybe 99% of pre-seed startups fail to become seeded startups. Seed startups. Seed startups are ones that get angel investors putting money in, right? That's a seed startup, right? They're getting money. And seeded startups are ones that get VC and institutional investors. That's what we in startup terminology they call early stage startup. So, wow, my back feels better leaning against that bar. So, what I realized was, if we can create a framework for validating, team building, MVP development, customer acquisition, right? And do it under a single framework called the Open Incubator framework that allows anyone to be part of it. We don't reject anyone, they reject themselves. That's our system. We provide them the path. You either stay on the path or you leave the path, you go do something else. But we're going to provide you the path, like this road right here. This is the OIF right here. This is OIF. You go along it. There's 7 levels to it. At the end of the 7 levels, you're either a seeded, right? And within the levels, we actually have seed. So within the levels, you get to seed. And ultimately, you launch as a seeded startup or as an open corp. So ultimately, I realized that the corporation, the closed institutional corporation, is the systemic problem that's causing all the harm and the anguish that's going on in the world. And ultimately, if we can facilitate the creation of what I call open corporations or open corps or people corps, then we can do massive goods. Because if we have a framework for launching ideas and say, hey, as long as you will, at the end of that road, if we take you through the center road, you will agree to become an open corp, right? We'll take your faith. Obviously, you can lie. That's fine, right? So there are going to be people who are going to say, yeah, sure, and then at the end of the road, they're going to do whatever they want. We don't care about that. We believe most people are going to see the value and the power of being a selfless corporation, one that's interested in the greater good, and that is employee-owned, that contributes 20 to 80% of net profits back into launching more open corps, that united, we can ultimately defeat the closed institutional corporation, the corporation that is only interested in a few stakeholders. And we can have corporations that will, for the most part, be selfless. And selfless means interested in the greater good. So, that's my talk. How can you help? Well, you can become an archangel. Now, startups have angels and super angels. Okay, both of them are to be, in order to be an angel and a super angel. One is just a group of angels, by the way. You have to be an accredited investor, which very few people are. And you can do a search on accredited investors, but basically it means you have $2 million in the bank, or I believe, something like that. There's $2 million or something, or yada, 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 or there's a bunch of other things. Actually, technically, since I'm on a board of a company, I am an accredited investor, ironically, because it also extends to board members of corporations. So since I'm a board member of a corporation, FOUNDUPS Corp, I am an accredited investor, technically, but I'm not really. I don't have the $2 million. So basically, an archangel is anyone who contributes minimum of $25 to our fund FOUNDUPS. And basically what we do with your contribution is you can designate it to a specific FOUNDUP as you wish. I recommend designating it to FOUNDUPS Corp because we're the mama of all FOUNDUPS, and that's, right now we are a FOUNDUP. This opportunity is not going to be available as soon as we become a seed FOUNDUP, which we're not yet. Okay, we're a pre-seed FOUNDUP. And ultimately, what we're going to do is give you a reward letter in FOUNDUP dollars, at 100 your contribution. So if you make $1,000 contribution, that's 100,000 FoundUp dollars. That for 1-to-1, as defined in our articles of incorporation, you can purchase our equity with it, either at our private placement or our IPO. So you can hold on to it and wait for our IPO, or you can get it at our private placement. It doesn't matter, right? But under our articles of incorporation, we accept FoundUp dollars for the purchase. And not only that, you can actually, let's say you want to hold on and put into a different FoundUp. Any FoundUp that's launching in a private placement IPO, you can apply your FoundUp dollars at 1/10 the value. These are secondary FoundUps, not primary. So your primary is at 100-to-1. Your secondary is at 10-to-1. FoundUp dollars for it. So, or let me say this. Actually, let me say it correctly. To a primary FoundUp, it's 1-to-1. For a secondary FoundUp, it's 10-to-1 FoundUp dollars. Okay, that's probably the best way to think about it, instead of 1/10 your value. So you can help us launch open corps. You know, my heart goes out to all the folks that are fighting the IMF and the World Bank. I wish you guys the best of success. Here is a solution, a very simple solution. And all it takes is a little bit of money for us to launch it. And I invite you to be part of it. You can email me at mike@foundups.org. Join us, become part of our open corp. Anyone could come, we're like an open Google. Anyone could be part of us. I invite you to do so. Thanks.